Have you ever wondered why every villain in the New Testament seems to share the exact same name? Decades before the famous events in Bethlehem, a powerful political dynasty was quietly forming in the ancient world. A family known as the Herods would hold a tight grip on the land of Israel for roughly a century. From the manger in Bethlehem to the cold walls of a Roman prison, their presence shapes the entire era. Many readers of history assume that the name Herod belonged to a single, impossibly long-lived ruler. In reality, it was a family line that passed down the crown like a prized heirloom from generation to generation. Each successor stamped the exact same name onto the next, creating a bloodline marked by absolute authority. Yet, behind this dynasty lay a striking paradox hidden inside the very meaning of their famous family title. The name Herod actually originates from an ancient Greek term that translates directly to mean a hero. Scholars trace the linguistic root to two distinct parts, combining the word for hero with a poetic song. It was intended to sound like a glorious melody sung in honor of a great savior who saves the day. To any ancient listener, hearing the name Herod immediately evoked images of strength, glory, and noble rescue. But how did a family with such a noble title leave behind a legacy of fear and destruction? These men did not adopt this title by mere coincidence, for it served as a calculated political brand. It announced to the world that here sat a supreme champion, a ruler truly worthy of praise and admiration. However, the reality of their reigns delivered the exact opposite of what their noble title promised. The family that called itself a heroic song spent an entire century composing a grim historical tragedy. Every single ruler in this line proved to be a striking study in desperate, counterfeit greatness. They constantly reached for crowns that were never rightfully theirs, driven by deep-seated political anxiety. To understand their deep insecurities, one must look closely at where this ambitious family originally came from. The Herods were not Jewish by ancestral blood, but belonged to a neighboring people known as the Idumeans. This group traced their lineage back to Esau, the elder twin who famously traded his birthright for stew. For generations, the descendants of Esau and Jacob lived as bitter rivals across neighboring borders. When Israel sought safe passage through their lands long ago, Edom answered with immediate military force. Centuries later, when ancient Jerusalem fell, their neighbors stood on the sidelines and cheered the destruction. Eventually, a Jewish ruler conquered the region and forced the population to adopt the Jewish faith. Out of this forced assimilation, one highly ambitious family steadily climbed the dangerous ladder of Roman power. They were Jewish in political allegiance, but carried the ancient bloodline of rival Edom. The birthright that Esau threw away in ancient times was now being reclaimed by his aggressive descendants. They sat upon a golden throne that historically belonged to the royal lineage of King David. What happens when an insecure ruler spends his whole life terrified of losing his throne? This perpetual insecurity drove almost every violent decision made by the first famous king of the line. Herod the Great was a master builder who raised massive fortresses across the rugged desert landscape. He engineered a deep water harbor out of nothing and rebuilt the Jerusalem temple into a magnificent wonder. Yet, this same builder was consumed by a dark, relentless fear of losing his political authority. He eliminated several close family members whenever he suspected a treasonous plot against his crown. So, when wise travelers arrived asking for the newborn king of the Jews, the paranoid king panicked. He pretended to offer peaceful worship, but secretly planned a terrible act to eliminate any potential rival. When his initial attempt failed, he issued a harsh decree targeting young children in the surrounding village. Yet, the rightful child escaped safely, leaving the dying king to perish in deep personal turmoil. This dark pattern repeated when the empire divided the kingdom among the ruler's surviving sons. One son, named Archelaus, ruled Judea with such extreme brutality that even a young family avoided his territory. His violent reputation directly caused the young Jesus to be raised far away in the quiet town of Nazareth. Another son, Herod Antipas, took control of the northern region of Galilee and built new capital cities. Antipas eventually arrested John the Baptist for boldly speaking out against the ruler's unlawful marriage. During a lavish birthday banquet, the king made a foolish, reckless oath in front of his elite guests. To save face before his peers, he ordered the tragic end of the famous prophet in a dark cell. Can a tyrant truly maintain power when confronted by absolute silence? When Jesus later stood trial, Antipas eagerly hoped to witness a sensational magical display. Instead, the accused remained completely silent, leaving the arrogant ruler with no power or leverage. Frustrated by the silence, the ruler mocked the prisoner with elegant robes before sending him away. A generation later, Herod Agrippa I stepped onto the stage to assert his political dominance. He targeted the growing early church by executing key leaders and throwing Peter into a heavy prison cell. Yet, an unexpected escape proved that human locks could not stop the movement he sought to crush. Agrippa later traveled to the coastal city of Caesarea to deliver a grand speech before a massive crowd. He wore a magnificent robe woven with pure silver that blazed brilliantly under the morning sun. As the crowd cheered and proclaimed him a god, the proud king happily accepted the blasphemous praise. Historical accounts record that he was struck down in that exact moment, suffering a severe collapse. The king, who shone like a deity in the morning, met a sudden tragic end before the night fell. Despite the tragic end of the monarch, the movement he tried to stop continued to grow rapidly. The final ruler in the famous family line was Herod Agrippa II, who heard Paul speak in court. Unlike his ancestors, this king did not issue violent orders, but listened carefully to the entire argument. Yet, despite understanding the powerful message, he simply stood up and walked away from the truth. The century-long dynasty ended not with a dramatic battle, but with a quiet refusal to yield. Why do grand empires always crumble while the quietest ideas end up changing the world forever? Looking back across the entire century, the historical pattern becomes remarkably clear to any observer. Every member of this dynasty attempted to hold a counterfeit version of true royal greatness. They claimed the title of king, yet their authority was constantly built on fear and political maneuvering. They constructed grand monuments of stone, while a far greater spiritual temple was quietly being established. They carried a name that promised a hero, yet left behind a historical legacy of tragic failure. The real hero of the story did not arrive with grand armies or luxurious silver robes. He survived the harsh decrees of paranoid rulers and chose a path of total humility. Instead of demanding worship from crowds, he willingly gave up his life for the sake of others. The monumental stone buildings constructed by the Herods eventually crumbled into absolute ruins. Their impressive masonry could not secure a lasting legacy against the natural passage of time, yet the quiet movement they tried so hard to suppress expanded across the entire ancient world. The dynamic contrast between these two kingdoms remains one of history's most compelling lessons. One kingdom relied on raw political power, constant fear, and the force of heavy iron weapons. The other kingdom operated through quiet sacrifice, unwavering truth, and selfless service to humanity. Human rulers often build elaborate monuments to reassure themselves of their own permanent legacy. Yet, history continuously demonstrates that such physical structures are inherently temporary and fragile. The story of this ancient family serves as a timeless warning about the nature of power. It shows how easily human ambition can transform a promise of heroism into a tragic reality. The pursuit of artificial greatness ultimately leads to isolation, fear, and eventual collapse. In contrast, true leadership is found in laying down personal ambition for a higher purpose. What if everything you built to make yourself immortal vanished within a single generation? The dynasty that fought so hard to protect its crown ultimately lost everything it sought to hold. Their names became a historical footnote, associated with tragedy rather than the heroics they promised. Meanwhile, the humble message they attempted to silence continues to resonate across centuries. Understanding this history provides deep context to the dramatic events of the ancient world. It reveals the intense political pressures that surrounded every step of the early movement. It demonstrates how deep-seated insecurity can drive leaders to make destructive historical choices. Every Herod faced a pivotal choice between maintaining their small crown or recognizing true authority. In the end, each one chose to preserve their temporary status at a profound personal cost. Their lives remind us that earthly status and public applause are remarkably fleeting phenomena. The real strength of any era is not measured by grand architecture or fearsome military force. It is found in the enduring power of truth, justice, and selfless devotion to others. As history swept past the magnificent palaces, the true narrative of the era became clear. The family that branded itself as a song of heroes composed a tragic, sobering lesson. Their story stands as a permanent reminder of the difference between genuine and false power. Real victory is never achieved through force, intimidation, or the sacrifice of innocent lives. It belongs to those who build upon a foundation that outlasts the passage of time. The ancient ruins in the desert still echo with the memory of a fallen dynasty. They stand as silent witnesses to an ambitious family that reached for absolute earthly glory. And they remind every generation of the clear line between a counterfeit champion and a real hero. How do you balance the desire for personal achievement with the call to serve others? History ultimately rewards those who choose principle over temporary prestige. The legacy of these ancient rulers proves that power gained at any cost is inherently unstable. True authority does not need to prove itself through force or public spectacles. It shines quietly through integrity, compassion, and commitment to the greater good. Centuries later, we still analyze these ancient decisions to learn how to lead today. The downfall of arrogant power structures is a recurring theme across human history. Those who seek to control every outcome often find themselves trapped by their own fears. True strength lies in accepting vulnerability and acting with genuine humility. When we look past the grand architecture, we see the lasting value of human connection. The choices made long ago still hold profound lessons for our modern world. Power without empathy inevitably leads to isolation and spiritual emptiness. Every generation must choose which kind of legacy it wishes to build for the future. Will we build temporary monuments of pride or lasting foundations of truth? The answer to that question determines whether we become false legends or true heroes.